to another, the second episode of A Nerd's Perspective. I'm Triple Zach. It's me. It's Triple Z. Is that a catchphrase? Can I use that? I'm here with my forever co-host. Yeah, that's it. I locked you in. You signed the contract. That would have been hilarious. What a way to start the show. Hello, Mike. How you doing? Yeah, dude. It's Monday morning. We're starting the week off right. So let's talk real quick about what Invincible is. Okay. So, by the way, I don't know, because this is the second show we've ever done, so maybe we could talk about a couple other things. Nerd show, we talk about nerdy things. For anyone that didn't watch last week, we're going to be talking about movies, TV shows, anything nerd related. And something very nerdy to everybody is superheroes, comics, and whatnot. We have a lot of different animated shows these days. We have. Are there any?
Fuck, I was muted the whole time. Shit.
So nobody heard what you were saying.
Nope, nobody heard what I said.
Well,
I said I had a hearty breakfast, I had a cup of coffee, and I'm ready to talk about Invincible. So, and I almost knocked down my really expensive setup. That was it.
You fucking idiot.
Yep, I suck.
Was I muted or?
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh, okay. Well, that's important.
No, it's just me. I'll be here. I'll be here.
Fuck it. I am recording this time, though, for anyone that was listening last week. I didn't record any of the episode because I'm stupid. But I hit record this time. So if you want to hear what Mike really said in the very beginning, he said a lot of bad words. A lot of things are going to get him canceled.
Yep.
Tune in to the actual feed when we upload this to the internet.
You know, I'm looking forward to never working in this town again. So
in this town. What town are we in?
Depot Town.
Depot Town. Boo.
Yeah. Working
All right.
title.
To the topic at hand. Invincible comic series.
Yes.
Robert Kirkman from I think 2003 was when it started, and it ran for I think 117 issues, somewhere in like the mid hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
It's this one long overarching story. It's got a bunch of side characters, but it's mostly about our hero, Invincible, Mark. And in the last few years, they announced that they were going to do the animated show with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, I believe, are the writers and the producers. Seth Rogen, apparently a big fan of these like niche comic series.
I didn't know he was a writer. I knew he was the voice of one of the characters. I knew he produced it. I didn't know he helped write it.
He's been writing for a long time, I'm pretty sure. I mean, he might not have written any of these episodes, but he definitely helped create the show.
Yeah.
Adapt the show, I should say, because Invincible was already made.
Mm-hmm.
And the show certainly takes a lot of liberties with the source material.
Yeah.
That's not something we're going to talk about too much because I don't know how much you read, Mike, because I, a long time ago, read the whole series, and now I'm in the process of rereading it because of the show. And you just started. How are you liking the comics so far?
So I think I'm up to like issue 18 or 19.
Okay. So shit's really popped off by now.
And I have already passed the season finale. It goes quick. Like it's just like there's no hesitation there. So I am loving it. I think it's awesome. I definitely see where the show kind of veered off from the story itself, but I like it. I like the liberties that they took. I think they made it flow really well for a show, and I think that they made some characters that are otherwise, in my opinion, kind of boring, way more interesting.
Yeah, especially for this first arc.
Yeah.
Call it that, because I wouldn't even say that they took liberties too much. It's more they condensed a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I say condensed, they stretched the hell out of the first 15 issues.
Yeah.
The first 15 issues became this 8 episode series. Again,
Mm-hmm.
no spoilers to the comic series of what exactly happens, but they don't. It doesn't take long for shit to really pop off.
Yeah.
In this show, though, they stretch it out, but they condense. They throw in future storylines from the comic into this first 8 episodes, which I thought was actually really interesting, and I actually really enjoyed for the sake of the show, because certain, like you said, certain stories got different like light shed on them.
Right.
So, especially with Mark's mom, and that we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, so first, without getting again, we'll hit the spoilers. We're definitely going to talk heavy spoilers when we get into the show, but. Overall thoughts, non-spoilery. Do you like the show?
I love the show. And Delco is saying that you're echoing. So let's try and see if we can figure this out.
Technical difficulty.
Yes, sir. But yeah, no, I love the show. I think it's great. Like I said, I think I enjoy some of the other characters that I otherwise thought were kind of boring in the comic series. And I can't wait to see what they do next, because they're kind of like taking it as their own. And it's really easy for creators to take some source material and try to put their own spin on it and just totally ruin it. And we saw that with Mortal Kombat. And we saw that with some other stuff that... I don't know if we're ever going to really talk about them too much. I think RoboCop might be a good spin for that. There was like this great source material with the other movies, and they tried to redo it and put their own spin on it, and it sucked. So
it was a weird choice. You're obviously right. There's been plenty of examples of taking source material and doing weird stuff with it. Like even a lot of the big comic book movies. Like my personal favorite example is Batman v Superman.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one.
One of the greatest stories ever, and you decide to do none of it, and you take the only core concept, which is Batman punching Superman in the face,
right,
and then you put it in the worst, terrible scenario. Right. So we've seen it happen plenty of times, and we love Zack Snyder. I mean, we love the Zack Snyder Justice League movie, but the Batman v Superman is still terrible.
Yeah. Delco, Mobs, thanks for joining us, guys.
Hello, friends, and welcome. Okay, speaking of Superman, so Invincible.
Mm-hmm.
In your best summary, what's the synopsis of the show?
It is the ShopRite brand Justice League.
Okay, yeah.
And Superman goes AWOL and kills everybody.
Okay, spoilers, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's in the title.
now we're spoilers, guys.
So, Superman kills everybody, all of his friends, and welcome.
Well, what's Superman's name in the show?
Omni-Man.
There you go.
Nolan Grayson is his secret identity.
His given Earth name.
Yeah. There is... I'll get to this in a second. So, he kills everybody, and then he has his son, Superboy, clone person, whatever...
Clone. No, it's real stuff.
And he has his son start to learn his powers, and it just kind of takes off from there. I think I told you I watched that scene where he fights the Guardians of the Globe like 7 times.
So the Guardians of the Globe are the Justice League. That's the version.
They're the ShopRite brand
of the Justice League. And again, this isn't really a spoiler for the comic series, but in the comics, you don't see them. You see them in one issue, and then they die in that very same issue, and then that's it. They introduce them and they kill them. In this show, they introduce them in the very opening of the show, which is not how the comic series starts necessarily. But the show starts with this big kind of generic hero save the day kind of scene. With the guard, and they show off all the powers of all the Guardians, and you, having no idea what was about to happen because you had not read the comics at the time, right. What was your thought of like, oh, this is how the show is? What is this?
my first reaction was, holy shit. I did not expect that show to be that brutal. It was brutal right off the bat.
You talking about from the very first scene?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the very first scene, like what.
I thought you said the episode. I'm sorry. The first scene, I thought it was great. I loved them. I was like, okay, that's Batman. Okay, that's Green Lantern. Okay, that's Wonder Woman.
Did you feel like, as you were watching it, did you feel like, okay, these are the guys that I'm gonna be attached to for the show? Like these are guys that I'm gonna carry through?
No.
Did you really think they were gonna die right away?
I didn't think they were gonna die, but I didn't think that they were gonna be the main focus of the show because I kind of had
not the main focus. Like, what were your thoughts of the Guard? Like you were like, oh, okay, this is this version of the Justice League, and this is what
I thought they were cool. I really liked Darkwing. I liked their different spins on like what the Justice League was. You know, I think they kind of made it their own, and that they were a perfect example of characters that I thought they made way more interesting in the show than they did in the comics. Because, like you said, they're just like, oh yeah, and the Guardians go over there. So just
exactly. They take the time to stretch it. They stretch the relation that all of these characters actually had with other people too. They go into the Red Rush, the Flash version, the Russian Flash. They have a whole scene with him, and they that actually leads to a brand new story that the comics don't tell, which is Debbie, the wife of Nolan, starting to question Nolan, which is not at all what happens in the comics.
No.
So Debbie Grayson, Mark Grayson, Nolan Grayson. These are the immediate family members of Nolan Grayson, who is Omni-Man, who is the Superman of this world. He's the strongest superhero. He has basic powers. He's just really fast. He can fly, and he hits really hard. There's no other superpowers. That's all he does. And
he can balance a checkbook in like 2 seconds. So
right, he's probably very.
But they don't tell you that. You gotta get to know the guy.
You gotta get to know the guy. Well, you don't really want to get to know him.
Yeah.
So the first episode, they do a lot of setup. They set up Mark in high school still, with William, his best friend, who is in this show openly gay.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the comics did that. I think they alluded to it heavily in the comics, but it really wasn't a story. It was more just kind of like a throwaway line in like one of the first issues. But in this show, they actually made it a plot and the storyline that kept going again to the way later episodes in this first season. And another change that it was a very welcome change that they didn't dance around it. They just said, hey, this is what this character is. And him and Mark are best friends. So Mark is what, like 17, 18?
17.
Hasn't gotten his powers yet. And then like halfway through the episode, gets his powers, gets the first suit, which is the terrible like Spider-Man thrown together, you know, what's the like a ski mask and orange
sweatpants
suit.
Yeah, he has his version of his homecoming suit,
right?
Basically,
and it's a very whimsical show for this first episode. It starts off pretty normal as the comic series does, and then as you said earlier on, the last, I think it was the last 2 minutes or so, 2 or 3 minutes. We are black on the stream I'm looking at right now.
We're black?
Yeah, I don't see our faces anymore.
Why are we black?
We're getting told to check the Discord.
What's going on here?
Technical difficulties. That's what's going on.
Is that better? Nope.
Don't worry, I'll cut this out of the feed. All right. Do 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 do. What's the word? What's going on? Tell the people
Well, we totally lost the Zoom call here.
on the stream. You mean?
Yep.
My goodness
So
gracious.
I'm trying to fix it.
Can you still hear us? Somebody.
Oh,
Are we back?
I think so.
Gotta wait for the delay. I haven't seen anything yet. Still don't see us. Okay, so they can still hear us. So we're still talking.
Why is this happening to me? Oh my goodness.
You guys can't see it right now, but Mike is currently pulling his hair out. No, what are you doing with that fork? Don't stick it in your ear. All right, well, you know what? While Mike is figuring this out, I'm reading the chat right now. Delco, what'd you think of the show? Give us your thoughts. What'd you think of that first season? Gotta do a lot of clicking. It was amazing. Yeah, and I see you you never read the comics, which is totally fine. This show really does a lot to introduce everyone to a lot of characters. Hey, I see us again. The show does a lot to introduce a lot of characters right away. Just here for the swimsuit portion of the show. We're almost there. First, let's get through this very first episode, and then we're not gonna break down every episode like last week with Winter Soldier and Falcon. I did it again. Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're just gonna break down our overall thoughts of the whole show. But I definitely want to talk about the big moment of the first episode. And you said you watched it like 25 times. You're typing again. Stop typing.
I had to let them know I fixed the echoing here because I have to mute myself while you're talking to fix it.
Okay, well, anyways, you watched that end of that first episode 25 times. So, real quick, Omni-Man kills everyone. That's the premise. In the comics, it just cuts to them and they're all dead, and he's just standing there basically. But in the show, and I love this decision, we watch a full-on Justice League versus Superman fight in like it was like a 3-minute fight, animated beautifully and brutally. Every gut, every organ is shown whenever body parts are ripped off. It's disgusting and amazing in so many different ways. Yeah. So go ahead. What did you think of those last few minutes?
I wanted to immediately watch it again. I loved it. I loved how much of a shock value it gave the show because it kind of set the premise that you don't really know what you're supposed to expect out of this now. And I like that they kind of built up the mystery behind why he did it in the show. They didn't really do that in the comics. So they also gave Dark Demon, is that his name?
Yeah. It's no, it's Demon Blood or
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
They gave
Dark
him
Blood.
Dark Blood. Thank you. They gave him way more depth in the show than they did in the comic. I liked their
real quick, in the comic, he's a joke.
Yeah.
That's really his character is. He gets hired to figure out who it is. Everyone finds out who it is, and then he comes back a little later on. Oh, maybe they'll do it though in the show. I don't want to ruin it. All right, I won't say anything. All right, keep going.
So, you know what? I think I kind of figured out what the echoing problem was. I'll fix it in a second. So they gave Darkblood and Omni-Man more of like a relationship in the show. He was like kind of interviewing Omni-Man more than he did in the comic from what I've seen so far. And they exorcised him back to hell also in the show, which was a really fun addition.
Well, that was Cecil. We'll talk about Cecil in a little bit. But I want to talk about mainly the fight. So the fight was absolutely disgusting. He full on murders every one of the Guardians. But this is something, again, that's a little different. He actively gets the shit kicked out of him. And, like, it's a real back and forth fight. It wasn't a full slaughter. It turned into a slaughter. But they were getting good shots on him, and you saw that they were using their powers. Like, you got to watch the full Guardians of the Globe, like, doing cool shit for a good period of time before they all get slaughtered. And then he goes into a coma. And this leads to, which doesn't happen in the comics. Nolan's just like, I don't know what happened. That's pretty much what his thing is. In the show, though, he's there and he uses the excuse after he wakes up from the coma. He uses the excuse that he had no idea he was in the room, but he has just as little of an idea what happened as anybody else. So, like you said, over the next few episodes, Darkblood starts investigating it, and he figures it out, which is a little different, but it also leads to the connection with Debbie. So now Debbie, the mom of Mark, who is Invincible, and we'll talk about Invincible himself, which is the kid who was the star of the show, who is fucking awesome. I think Steven Yeun is his name.
Yes.
He is such a great voice actor, and he was so perfectly cast in this. I just want to praise the hell out of him because a lot of the voice acting was fantastic in this show. And that's something I can't say about a lot of different animated series. Because this is an adult show, so it's got a little bit of a different twist to it, so it's a little easier to play it more realistically. Whereas, kid cartoon shows, they got to be a little bit more over the top and cringy at times. But for this, everyone played it super seriously. Everyone played it super well. So Debbie. So in the comics, Debbie is totally oblivious for the first several issues, and then the last episode happens in the comic version, and Debbie finds out with the rest of the world what Omni-Man really is. But in the show, she figures it out on her own. She basically goes on her own detective mission storyline throughout the whole 8 episodes, and she picks up on I think eventually she finds Omni-Man's bloodied suit and like picks out like pieces of the Guardians that were on him for some reason. And so
she brings it to the guy that makes the costumes. What's his name?
Art.
Brings it to Art, and he like analyzes the suit and figures out like, oh, this is from Darkwing's gear, and blood is from the Immortal, and they kind of piece it together that the only explanation was that he was the one that did all of it.
Yeah, and Art in the comics is also very important to Mark and Debbie, and they use him very well in the show too as like a close family friend. And it leads to a great scene between Nolan and Art after Nolan watches Debbie leave, and then he sits and has a beer with him, and you just feel the tension of Omni-Man knowing.
Don't piss off your tailor.
Exactly. You could just murder him. Exactly. He says that. So real quick, I do want to mention J.K. Simmons as Omni-Man.
Fantastic.
So great. And it's so perfect for what he is, because he starts as just like a stern, kind of happy-go-lucky dad, and he turns into this murderous monster. And with all the self-conviction in the world, J.K. Simmons nails that on the head. Fun thing though that I don't know if you knew this. You probably recognized it, but art is Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill, yeah, like Delco said, it's the show has a stacked cast,
Oh
and
yeah.
he said Stephen Yeun killed it, and I totally agree. I haven't really watched a lot of his stuff, but I loved his performance as Mark in the show. I think he he acted like
He
a
was Glenn.
teenager really well, like really well, and that's not easy to do. I think
He picks up on Mark's like nuances from the comics, like the way Mark is just a normal kid, but he feels the weight of everything that's going on, and it's not something he just like he knows he has to do it, but it's very Spider-Man in a lot of ways. Like
I was just thinking that.
It's Superman combined with Spider-Man, where Spider-Man is the idea of this guy with incredible powers who still has to live a normal, like lower middle class life, and with the powers of Superman, though. So you have this kid who's just trying to get through life, who is trying to go to school at the same time, and the comics really dig into that. And I'm excited for future seasons to really show like that comparison, because it really does follow a very Spider-Man esque story when it comes to his normal life. I loved all of that. So Debbie eventually figures out who Omni-Man is. That's one of the side stories. So what we were talking about before was they were combining a lot of future storylines with this first season to kind of streamline certain things to keep the show, I guess, flowing. To drag out, because I think the grand finale of this season is Mark finds out Omni-Man kills the Guardians, and the finale is Mark versus his dad.
I don't know about you when you read the comic, but watching the show first, immediately I was like, he's going to have to turn on his dad at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it was set up perfectly that first episode. You know that there are consequences coming, and they build it, and they build it, and they build it, and then it pops off. Like, and in the comics, it's just like it happens, and then like 5 or 6 issues later, they're fighting because of another side story that they combine. Like they just like Frankensteined a bunch of different side plots to make this to make the first season. The Mauler twins, who are mainstays in the comic series, they get a lot of screen time in this series. The Mauler twins are villains. They're these 2 blue guys who have super strength or whatever, but they're also very smart, and they keep making clones of each other. And their gimmick is that one of them always makes the other, but the copy is so is
Seamless.
is made to the exact second that he's made, so he is under the impression that he is the original. So they have this great relationship throughout the whole series that they never really know who the original is, and it kind of leads to fun little banter. But they're super smart, and that's very important, and they use that as a very important plot point.
I loved the part where they're bringing back the Immortal, and they're like, well, Cecil couldn't do it. And they're like, Cecil's an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're very, very confident in their abilities. So let's talk about Cecil for a second. Cecil is the Nick Fury of this universe. But Nick Fury, if it was in a rated R universe where Nick Fury had a lot of bad decisions that he had to make, that he felt like he had to make for the sake of humanity, which is nailed on the head pretty openly in the show. I'd say it's a little bit more subtle in the comics. He's very like kind to Mark in the beginning in the comics, but in this show you could tell like this guy's kind of a dick, and he's kind of just using everybody to get what he needs.
Country first.
Exactly. I think it's played a little bit more subtly in the comics, and
it is.
That's no slight on the show, because I think both medias are amazing. I think the comic series is fucking perfect. It's probably one of my favorite comics ever. But the show really adapts it well for the sake of it being a show. So,
Right.
and what I mean by that is the subtlety of the comics is you have 100 issues to work with, and you have an infinite palette of ways to show it with the medium of comics of drawing this stuff. And with the TV show, you're a little bit more confined, so they had to streamline a lot of things. So they had to streamline the Cecil storyline to kind of say to you, hey, this is what this guy's really about.
But they did it, and they still stuck to the source material, and they didn't screw it up. And I think
Yes.
that's a huge thing that people try to that with Batman v Superman. There is decades of history between those two characters leading up to that fight, and that's illustrated throughout every single comic of the Justice League where Batman and Superman kind of butt heads. And you take that, and you have this fantastic comic that Frank Miller made, and he kind of brings all of that to a head in their climactic battle. And then Zack Snyder kind of took that and condensed it to where they just met, and he's expecting you to feel like there's this this weight behind this fight, and there's not. So
Yeah,
there's a way to do it, and I think that this show captured that perfectly.
yeah, Snyder adapted that comic series to fit his universe. So he wasn't trying to remake Dark Knight Returns. I understand that. But there's weight, like you said, to the meeting and the fight between those two characters that was never given the right justice. But in this comic series and in the adaptation in the show, they try, and it shows how much they actively try to make everything make sense, to make everything lead to the next thing, and to make everything connect in its own certain way. Like I love the Debbie storyline because it connects a lot of storylines that the comic series just basically tells you what happens.
They even gave Cecil and Nolan's relationship weight in the show, and they didn't really do that in the comics. It was just that was another one of those throwaway lines. I was always calling on your dad, and I relied on him a lot. And you're like, oh, okay, so they've been working together for a really long time. But you really got into that relationship in the show, and you cared about those characters and how their friendship is now ending because this guy is a psychopath monster, and it was under everybody's nose and nobody knew it. So I loved that they gave Cecil this scene with Omni-Man where he's teleporting back and forth, having this conversation, why did you do this? We had a good thing going type of thing. We were friends for years, and
right.
it expanded on what the comic already had there. And it's one of those things where they took it and they made it their own, and they did a perfect job, because you can see that in the comic. In your mind's eye, you'd be like, yeah, I could see that being a couple pages of dialogue and banter, and it feels like it was pulled right out of the story, as opposed to just thrown in there.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it. It feels like it was pulled from the comic and slapped onto the show, and they do that a lot. There's a lot of exact rips from the panels of the comics right into the show, and that's especially prevalent in the final episode, which I fucking loved, and we'll talk about it soon.
Me too, yeah.
But real quick, let's talk about the fucking star of the show, which is Invincible, Mark Grayson. So he gets his powers, and his story is basically the superhero origin story. He's learning. He gets into a first few little scuffles. He stops a couple small crimes, especially the one with and I can't believe I'm forgetting his name now.
Titan,
the Rockman, who is played, I believe, God, he won the Academy, Mahershala Ali, which is great. Great casting choice, because that's another voice actor who's really able to portray two different sides of a story, where you could tell he's a family man, but he had a goal. He had a mission, and I love the way it's stretched out in that episode. And we're introduced to a lot of great, and anyone here that might have read the comics, if anyone here has, and you will find out soon, we get introduced to a lot of fun future characters, future recurring characters, one being Battle Beast. And anyone who knows who Battle Beast is knows what I'm talking about. So we'll have fun with Battle Beast in the future. But and they do him justice in that very first episode that he's introduced. Like, he's not just a throwaway character, even though that's how he's introduced, like physically introduced by Machine Head, where he's going down the line of all these mercenaries he hires to take on Titan and Invincible, who have like a fun little team up midway through the series, midway through the season. Battle Beast beats the fuck out of everyone. That's another great fight in the I forget which episode it was, but it was one of the. It was like
I think it was like 4 or 5.
Right, and that might have been the first, besides the murder of the Guardians. I think that might have been the first real brutal beating that you have to watch.
Yeah, it was.
Because, and they change a couple things about it, but the gist of it is the same. They go in to stop Machine Head, who is this crime boss of the city. Which the city, is that Chicago? I'm pretty sure it's Chicago.
I think they say that. Chicago. I know in the last episode he gets like hurled into Chicago, but I don't know if that's necessarily where the story's taking place.
It might not. That might not have been his city, but they do fight in Chicago in the end. But yeah. So Machine Head is this big crime boss. So Invincible and Titan go fight Machine Head, and Machine Head hires all of these big villainy type characters, and one of them is Battle Beast. And they don't really say anything about him. They just, here's Battle Beast. And then the fight starts, and you see that everyone's kind of fighting normal stuff, and then Battle Beast just starts mauling people, and no one can stand up to him, and he's just destroying people. And you see the blood, and like I said, the blood and the guts, and they have this great moment where Battle Beast crushes Monster Girl's head. So that was a big change from the comics. It's not her that happens to, and it's one of those things that even someone who read the comics, I go, holy fuck, what are they doing? Like, what's happening? What's this going to lead to? So I love that whole fight scene. That's one of my favorites of the show.
Mine
Obviously,
too.
I think we'll both have the same answer for our favorite fight of the series, and we'll break that down later too. But now I want to talk about, now that I covered Monster Girl a little bit, I want to talk about all the side characters, because there's a lot. They have to juggle a lot of side characters, and I think the important ones haven't really quite gotten their shine yet. I think this first 8 episodes was really more about Mark, his dad, his relationship with Amber, and which is important. It is still important to his life. And a little bit of Adam Eve, not so much, and Robot.
I love Robot's story, but really quick, I just want to touch on that fight with Battle Beast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The show makes Invincible not very invincible.
It's a hilarious thing that they it's like a running gag.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So in the comics, you see a lot of his fights, and you see him do a lot more fights, actually, a lot more hero work in the comics than you do in the show. And while he's doing all these heroics, he's really just like not fazed by like anybody he fights, really. Like once in a while he's like, I felt that, but it didn't really hurt. And even in this battle, he wasn't like half dead on the floor in the comic. He was just kind of like beaten to a pulp, and he was like, like, help me now,
Yeah.
In the show, he had his guts turned inside out.
Right.
So the Guardians show up. He's like, well, thanks for the help, guys. I could have used that a little bit sooner, type of thing.
Yeah.
And the show, he just gets totally obliterated. He like stands no chance. So I really liked that. Even though he's like a Superman type character, he's not totally invincible, and he is totally beatable because he's still so new, and that just makes for an interesting story. It's like the perfect type of. Like Spider-Man when he first starts out, he's always screwing up and doing all these stupid kid things, and you're like, well, he's
getting his ass kicked, and that adds to the stakes, and that's even with Omni-Man, where you see like he's obviously the strongest, obviously, but they don't just make him win. Right. Like it's always a struggle. And you see like when he gets pissed off though, then that switch happens, and you as a viewer go, oh fuck. it's over. And that helps with this kind of show because you get that moment of like hope that, oh my God, is Mark, and I don't know about people that haven't read the comics, but and maybe our chat can help us out here with how they felt about that final episode. But I'm wondering if people thought maybe Mark was going to beat him, or maybe Mark was going to be able to hold off until the end. But that's not what happens. It's not a fight. That last episode is not a fight. It's him getting absolutely demolished.
Yeah, he was just straight up beaten half to death. Well,
Yeah,
not even.
and
He was like within an inch of his life in that fight.
yeah, he throws punches, but none of them work. And you see that. Like, Omni-Man does not take it easy on him. And every time he punches him, it just like stops on his face. Like, all that stuff. They go hard on the idea that it's a no contest in that last one. Okay, but we kind of skimmed over, like, because you wanted to talk about that real quick. But
Yeah,
let's
but
go back
before that, Delco just wanted to add in he thought his ass was dead and he had no faith in him to beat his dad at all. And I totally agree. And I think that was kind of foreshadowed when he first got his powers and he was training him and he hit him and he was like, ugh! Like he had the wind knocked out of him. He's like, that really fucking hurt. And he's like, well, we gotta be ready for anything, son. You know, like it was obvious he didn't stand a chance against Omni-Man. And he even, actually, I think he says it in the comics. I don't know. I forget if he says it in the show. But he says, you know, you're still so young. You're probably going to be just as strong as I am, if not stronger, when you
I think that's
age.
comic. Yeah, because that's brought up a lot about how Viltrumites, who are, which as is explained in the very first episode and in the very last episode in two different ways, the Viltrumites are Supermen. All of them. All of them have these powers. But it takes work to become the strongest. It's not something that you, and it's not even fully like a Saiyan thing either, like a Super Saiyan thing where in like Dragon Ball Z, Saiyans would get their asses kicked and they'd come back stronger. It's not necessarily even that. It's the more you work out, it's like working out your muscles. You get stronger. And these Viltrumites just have a higher threshold for their strength. But yeah, no, okay. So let's talk about the side characters again. Mostly Robot, who is the star side character, especially at a certain point in the comics. That no spoilers, you're not even up to that. But yeah, so the show, we'll talk about the show. Robot is literally a robot who is the smartest character, voiced by Zachary Quinto, which I loved. I thought his voice acting was spot on for that monotone, robotic voice. But then you are revealed, it's revealed to everyone that it's being controlled by this 25-year-old baby who who has these conditions, who literally can't be in open air or he'll die. So he makes this robot, and he's the smartest man alive. Whatever. That's the shtick. But it's very early. I think it's like the second episode where you find out that Robot has his own separate goals in mind, and that's a through line with the Mauler twins, where he hires the Mauler twins to make himself a copy out of another side character named Rexplode, who is another very important character, and I cannot fucking wait for the future of that character. But we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, so Robot kind of starts falling for Monster Girl, and because I'm just naming off all these fucking side characters like it's nothing, but I want to reiterate, the show does a really good job of giving these people time.
Yeah, you do end up caring about all the side characters, and they're all really interesting in their own way. Robot is by far the most interesting, I think.
Yes, he's definitely.
I also think Black Samson's really, really interesting. I like that he was a part of the Guardians, and then he lost his powers, and he got him back, and he's got a really, even in the comics, it's way more explored so far as to his life.
There's so many more characters in the comics because there's so much more happening. So they just keep it moving, which I love about the comics. Like I said, everything we're saying when we compare it to the comics, it's never going to be a slight on it because it's just done differently, not worse. It's just different. And it's amazing from both ends how well they were able to put this exact same story together, but in two different ways in a lot of ways.
Delco says that Black Samson had to die to get his powers back. That doesn't count.
Yeah, yeah, that's not very explored. It's more just I got my powers back. Cool.
Yeah, he had the Avatar instance where they just like hit him in the spine. He was like, "Oh shit, my Avatar state's back."
Yeah, I'm back. Isn't that what? Yeah, that's his power, right? Avatar state.
Yeah, that's Black Samson's power.
Yeah. So to the show's credit, like again and again and again, we're gonna keep saying this. They take a lot of what's happening in the comics and they streamline it. So Black Samson, the new Guardians, which is Rexplode, Black Samson, Duplicate, and Duplicate is our own fucking mess of a character that led to some fun moments. That's pulled straight from the comics, which was Rexplode and Adam Eve are dating in the very beginning, and then Rexplode cheats on Adam Eve with Duplicate, multiple versions of Duplicate. Exactly. Which is okay. No, I won't. I can't get to that part yet. Okay, because that's a spoiler for something else. Anyways, so Rexplode is with Duplicate, but then they have to reintroduce other new Guardians. I forget the other one's names. I'm sorry. I think Shrink Ray is one of them.
Yeah, something like that.
There's a couple other random ones, but they focus on these guys. In the comics, there's a fuck ton of side characters. They obviously focus on the main characters for the main bits, but there's a lot of different side characters. A lot of superheroes are in this universe.
Yeah.
So in the show, they've just focused on the new Guardians after the old Guardians are fucking murdered. And I think the robot story was handled perfectly, especially when it came to the reveal of what Omni-Man did, because they combined these two moments where the Mauler twins bring back Immortal, who Immortal is one of the main, probably, I think he was the leader of the Guardians.
He was.
Because Omni-Man wasn't a Guardian. He just worked with them. But Immortal was the leader, and in his fucking name, he can never die. But Omni-Man chops his fucking head off, so he can't regenerate. So the Mauler twins in the comics and in the show bring him back to life, but the reasons are different.
Right.
So in the comics, it's more generic. It's more like, let's get this guy, control him, use him for our own benefit. In the show, it's kind of the same, but the reason they're there is different. Is because Robot wants his own body, and he needs the technology that the Mauler twins can provide. And in exchange, it was for Immortal's healing thing.
And so that's another perfect example of what I was talking about before, where they just give all of these characters so much more depth in the show. And they take things that are in the comic and they kind of twist it to make it their own. And you're like, oh yeah, that's like exactly how I would have seen them doing it in the comic. You know, it's not like a foreign concept that it would have played out that way in the comic as well. But I think that, just to touch on Immortal really quick, I loved how they brought him back and he immediately went right after Omni-Man again, and they had a fight for like a minute, and then he just wrecks him the same exact way again, and it just illustrated perfectly that this guy just does not stand a chance against Omni-Man. Like he got more shots in this time on his own, but he still got beat the same way. The same exact way.
And it's because it obviously Cecil at the same time was trying to kill Omni-Man with this gigantic fucking monster, which doesn't happen in the comics. That's not at all how it happens. It's totally random. The comics, and again, I don't prefer either one because I loved how each of them did it. But in the comics, it's more of a shock. Like, holy shit, Immortal's back. What the fuck's happening? Oh my God, he remembers. Oh my God, Omni-Man just killed him again. Oh my God, Mark found out. Like, it's just one, bang, 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 bang. But in the show, it builds to it. It takes its time to let you sit in what Omni-Man did for the whole series, and you see Omni-Man start cracking under the pressure of what he needs to do, which isn't revealed. Like you said earlier on, there's this mystery behind what the fuck did he do that? Why did he do it? Never says it. For the whole 8 episodes, from the last scene of the first episode all the way up until the beginning of the 8th episode. That's when he finally reveals why he did it.
Yeah.
So it's a mystery the whole time. And then they bring back Immortal, which is a great little sequence that plays in his head where you see, which is only in the comics alluded to. Like, they don't really full on show you him as Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
But you see that it looks like Abraham Lincoln because he was. And it's this guy that lived all throughout time as the strongest man alive, not alien superhero, but the strongest man alive. And he, like you said, immediately goes after Omni-Man, but Omni-Man is already caught. Debbie already knows, Cecil already knows, and they're already trying to kill Omni-Man.
Yes.
So Omni-Man is on the run, I think, for the Pentagon, right? He's going to try to kill Cecil.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he gets passed by Mark, Invincible, who has no idea what the fuck's going on. And then Omni-Man tackles him. They start fighting. And then Mark is still confused, but then he sees his dad chop Omni-Man in half. And which leads to the great, pulled right out of the comics moment, we need to talk while he's covered in Omni-Man's blood.
Yeah, in Immortal's blood.
Yeah, in Immortal's blood. Great image. It's so perfect for the moment where it's just, he is so calm with what he just did, and Mark is freaking the fuck out. And another great fucking moment for Steven Yeun in the voice acting.
Yes.
He just plays this kid who just learned something horrific about his own dad, and he's struggling with it in that moment where Omni-Man is explaining all this insanity where how the Viltrumites have to kill each other to figure out who the strongest ones were. Because they're this conquering force. They're basically Saiyans. That's their shtick. So they, which is, if anyone doesn't know, Saiyans are the creatures that just go off, conquest a planet, and they just go on to the next one, just because for the sake of conquest.
But the twist here is that the Saiyans are Frieza.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They already are the strongest.
Yeah,
these are already the strongest, and yeah. So they. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Is there anything from the bulk of the show that you want to touch on before we cover this last episode? Because I feel like that's most of the conversation. The big conversation I feel like to have is this last episode.
The bulk of the show, like I said, I think that they gave some of these characters more depth than they did in the comic. Up to where I'm at in the comic right now, like I said, I think I'm at issue like 18 or something. Rexplode really doesn't have that heavy of a part yet, and he's not nearly as obnoxious as he is in the show. They allude to it, but again, you haven't really seen him so much in the comic.
I think a lot of that has to do with the voice actor.
Yeah, but that's what I'm getting to. Like, he just did like a phenomenal job, and he, like, up until this point in the comic series, you're just like, oh, okay, Rexplode's a dude that can, like, make shit explode, and he's there. But he, like, makes his presence known in this show. And I don't know if he also does this in the comic yet, but Robot, even because he's so animated and confident, Monster Girl takes notice of him, and Robot's like, all right, well, that's the guy I'm going to clone then to be.
It's even simpler than that. It's more of Robot in a very creepy way, and it's played creepily.
Yeah.
So they don't dance around it. It's creepy. Robot notices that Monster Girl, who I don't even think we mentioned yet, Monster Girl is a woman, an adult woman trapped in a little girl's body because every time she transforms into a monster, it stunts her lifespan and she goes younger. So she's like 29, but she looks 13. So in the show and in the comics, it's the exact same thing, the exact same story. And you haven't even gotten there yet, which is amazing to me. But in the show, it's Robot just notices Monster Girl is like attracted to Rexplode. Like she just thinks he's good looking. Like it has nothing to do with his personality. She's just like, oh, okay, I'll just take his DNA and I'll just look like him, so that I can so I can be with this Monster Girl. That's it. That's the only reason. That's the only reason they give. He just takes the DNA to look like Rexplode so he can be attractive when he gets his human body. And it's played off really well where Robot just doesn't give a fuck. He just is like, yeah, no, this is what I'm doing. This is what I am.
So now, does Robot also have Rexplode's powers because he's a perfect clone?
No, no, he does not. Huh. I don't think Rexplode has powers. I'm pretty sure those are just abilities, like those are items he throws.
Well, no, I thought his powers was he makes whatever he's holding explode.
I thought it was he has things that explode. I actually don't even know.
Well, I don't think in the comic I read that he was throwing something. He's like, well, that's just this item. Like, imagine what I can do with a golf ball. So, like, in my head, it was just like, oh, he's taking these things and giving them some kind of like superpower charge and making them explode when he throws them or something.
No, he doesn't. I don't know if the show will do something different. Maybe they will. Maybe they will give him these powers, but I don't think so. I think, especially in the comics, the answer is no. You'll never see Robot in the Rexplode body ever do anything with his powers. That's not what happens. So, so Robot becomes fucking a lookalike of Rexplode, which is really creepy.
It is really weird. And he's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. the voice acting is so great sometimes, and they are actually funny with some of the things. And it's fully R-rated, so he literally does say, what the fuck? It's great. So Robot is great. They played him off really well. I don't know how I feel about the new voice actor. I actually kind of would have preferred Zachary Quinto staying as like the robotic voice, but with a human body.
Yeah,
because that's kind of how he's played in the comics. And you'll see that when he it's not a huge spoiler, when he gets his human body, he still kind of talks like Robot. And in the show they do the same thing, but he's got a little bit more of a weird like shift in his voice because he's in a different body. I understand that. But it's a fucking comic and it's a fake superhero show. You could have just made it Zachary Quinto still.
Yeah. Just to illustrate that it's the same guy.
Exactly.
And like you said, he did such a great job as Robot. Like he was just fantastic, and he did so well that even as I think the new guy even did a great job because he still played it kind of robotic. Like he still had that very like monotone. Even when shit was going south, and he's like, Cecil said we have to stay here, guys, and Monster Girl's like, you're not a robot anymore,
which was cute, and I like that. I did like it, and the lines delivered. I guess I was just a little bit not so much of a fan of the way they were delivered. Nitpicking because I have to figure out something wrong with the show, or else we're just going to be praising it this entire time.
Can't give it too many Viltrumites out of 10.
Exactly, too many Viltrumites out of 10. All right. So if I remember anything from the middle of the show, we'll cover it. But let's talk about the final episode. So Mark finds out by Omni-Man murdering Immortal again in front of him that Omni-Man killed the Guardians, and it's a full-on turn. Oh, before that, in the very same episode, or was it the episode before, the scene where it's like straight out of The Boys season 2? Do you remember when? What the fuck's his name in The Boys? What's the Superman of that show? Homelander. When he walks into the cabin with the soldiers.
Yes.
It's the exact same scene, but you actually get to watch Omni-Man kill all of these soldiers.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, it's brutal, and it shows the full-on. And I love this, and I'm glad I remembered it because I wanted to point it out on the podcast. I loved when Omni-Man knew the gig was up and he was gonna have to just be straight up Nolan the Viltrumite from now on. He no longer walks around; he just flies.
Yeah,
like in a very straight, proper way, just flies from place to place to place. It so perfectly shows how much the switch has turned. Yeah. He is no longer a man. He's no longer a human pretending to be human. He is now going to kill everyone that gets in his way, and he does. He shows almost no hesitation. The only couple times he does is, and this kind of this foreshadows the humanity moment that comes later, but he lands next to William's car and he very slowly tilts his head down. And he says, "Where's Mark?" It's played so well. J.K. Simmons is so fucking great.
Yeah, he really is.
And he doesn't
I've never heard him do any voice acting before, but he is like a natural at it. And he, the scene where he's killing all the soldiers and then he goes across the street to Donald, and he grabs his fucking spine and crushes it. And he's like, "It's been an honor, sir." And he laughs. He's like, "Who are you talking to?" Yeah. It's like nothing to him. It's so sick. And the way he plays it off is just so nonchalant, and it's just so evil. And I loved it. I love the switch, like you said. It was flawless. And they don't do that in the comic, really. They really don't. The most they do is that he just kills Immortal again, and everybody's like, "What the fuck is going on?" But he murders like thousands of people before he fights Invincible in the show. Oh no, I'm sorry. While he's fighting Invincible in the show,
it's the same way in the comic. Like I said, this is not a slide on the comics because I love what they did in the comics because it's so out of left field. Right. It hits you out of nowhere that this is about to happen. That Immortal comes out of nowhere and the fight is fucking on and everyone knows who it is and they still kill thousands of people. But in the show, they really detail.
Right, yeah. That's what I was trying to convey. Yeah.
They really dig into what that means where they start fighting. So Invincible and Omni-Man start fighting. And it's not really a fight. It's Omni-Man punching Mark and Mark goes flying. That's just the way this fight goes. Very first punch, and you watch as Mark flies through a building and you watch as the blood and the guts from all the people that he's going through are being ripped in half, being torn to shreds, and he lands into the street and he watches the building start falling. He flies to stop it. He can't, and this woman and her daughter are trying to be saved by Mark, and he's trying his best to save them, and he fucking doesn't. The building falls, they're dead for sure, and he can't save any of these people, and it's so grim. Like, there's no hope.
Delco just said that scene took him to dark places, and like they
totally agree.
That means that they did their job really well because that's exactly what they were trying to. They tried to convey that it was totally hopeless for Mark to beat this guy or save anybody, and you felt his helplessness throughout the entire 45-minute episode. There was just nothing he could do, and Omni-Man even said it out loud. He was like, "Please, like,
you really think you could stop me? Like, it's over." And he says. And he shows him, and that's another thing. Is like, and the only way Omni-Man could show him is like, we live because he explains the Viltrumite lifespan, and that's they live thousands and thousands of years. They're not regular people, and regular people are specks in his life. They're like pets, and that's what he calls Debbie. And in the comics, that moment where he's explaining to Mark, because it's recorded and the world is watching it. It's the same way in the show. So everyone is watching Omni-Man deliver this speech about how he doesn't give a shit about humanity. Everyone is useless to him except for Mark. But and his mom, the wife, is like a pet to her. And in the comics, that's what just breaks her. Like, she just totally breaks down, and she is just not the same character for the rest of the series, almost for a long period of time at least. But in the show, she kind of maintains her composure for a very long time, and she kind of plays more of the determined mom role, which I actually really enjoyed. I was watching that and saying, okay, I like this shift of her character, and I really loved how it ends where they get to it. And it's almost like they pay the perfect homage to the comic series where you're watching it, and me as a comic book fan, I'm going, are they going to do the Debbie mentally breaks down bit? And I'm watching it all the way to the very last scene of the very last episode, and I go, there it is. Yep. They built it. They waited, and they hit you right when it counted the most for her breakdown.
Yeah, Delco saying that the pet line was really fucked up, and it was. It was like, it just showed how like out of touch and inhumane he was. Even though he played it off so well for decades, he tried. Yeah, and I think that the ending scene, which we'll get to in a second, kind of showed that he's like like somewhere in the middle maybe of humanity in Viltrumite, where he kind of cares about people, but only so much. I don't know how you felt about that ending scene.
Omni-Man, it's shown where he just the switch happens at the last episode where he's just killing everyone. But they built to that moment throughout the whole series where they're showing as soon as Nolan kills the Guardians, he's not the same person. When he wakes up from that coma, he's treating everyone differently and he's acting differently. He's acting like he cares a lot less because he knows what he has to do.
Yeah.
And so it basically, from episode 1 to episode 8, he spends those 7 episodes basically convincing himself, this is it. Like, I have to take care of this planet. None of these people matter to me, and we're gonna end it. So in this last episode, he's showing Mark by killing everyone around him, and he's grabbing Mark by the face and shoving him into a moving train, and makes Mark watch as these people get slaughtered like it's nothing. And that's exactly what he says. He goes, look at how easily I just killed all of those people. Like, these are the people you want to be with? We're so much better than them. So he feels like it's something he has to do. And what really changes is Mark. And that's kind of the thing that helps Omni-Man in the end, it helps him. We don't know yet what really happens with Omni-Man, but in the very last part of this fight, he just pushes him up against a fucking mountain and is just beating him to death. Just
that
punching
was really gruesome. That was way more gruesome than the comic was. It was. Yeah, and I think it further showed that he's so young and so new that he just does not even stand like a dream against Omni-Man yet. And that's the part where I kind of felt like maybe he is like in between like caring and not caring. Maybe his time on Earth has changed him a little bit, because he, 2 seconds before he left, he was like, I'll just make another son. Like, fuck it. I'll just kill you now and I'll start over. Like, it's like this much time to me anyway. So
it's not even fully though about him. I forgot what you said. I lost my train of thought. Anyways, so I had it, and then you said that, and it totally made me forgot. So he's punching him, and you're right. He says that right before the real big switch in the end happens.
Right.
But he's punching him, and he's punching him, and he had already said what he said, and he's like, fine, I'll just make a new one. And he starts beating him to death. And then something happens that doesn't happen in the comic.
Yep.
He gets a flashback of him taking Mark to a baseball game. And he's standing there in his Vegeta pose with Debbie walking up to him and saying, this is what humans do. Like, we cheer on our kids. And you watch as Nolan goes from stern Viltrumite to a loving dad.
To a loving human dad.
A loving human dad. And it's not one of pretend, and it's not him playing a role. He really, and he even says this to Mark. It's like, even for a while there, I was happy. Like, I actually liked living here, but I have a job to do. But punching Mark almost to death, and then he stops. He thinks about the moment, and then he starts yelling at him again. He's like, what's the point? Why are you fighting for something that none of these people are going to mean anything to you in 30 years because they're all going to be dead, or like 50 years because they're all going to be dead. So like, what will you have in 500 years? Which is the big line from the comic.
Yeah. And
all Mark says is, I'd have you, Dad. And that's all he says. And it totally changes everything for Nolan. And it was animated beautifully.
Yeah, it was perfect. You saw it on his face. The whole struggle of,
yep,
like, am I really doing the right thing here? Like, is my entire life's purpose wrong? Like, he struggles with that.
Yeah, and he realizes that something he never realized before was that he loved his son, and he loved his son more than he loved Viltrum. which was huge, which was a big moment for. Well, I mean, we'll get more of that later, but you see the switch happen, and then I said this earlier on in the podcast, and this is the moment that I was talking about, where he takes off and it's ripped straight out of the comic and put into the show, where he's flying out into space, and you see the tears start flying as he flies away.
Yeah, but I think the comic kind of illustrated, I mean, at least so far, how heavy that moment really was for a Viltrumite, because Viltrumites never leave their post, ever.
Yep.
They don't. And if they do, they come back and they just destroy it, like, outright. And when Mark tells Alan the alien, who's voiced by Seth Rogen, who was fantastic in that role.
Another great character. Yeah, he's only in a couple scenes he's only in one scene earlier on in the show.
Yeah.
And Alan is this member of a grander universe. We haven't been introduced to it yet, so we won't get into too much into it. But you're right. He's a very funny cycloptic alien that talks to Mark in the beginning of the show.
So he touches on it, like, Viltrumites don't give up, like they don't just leave. So for Nolan to leave his post because it's either that or kill his son, and he's not going to kill his son, is huge. Like it's unheard of for his people to do that. So imagine what would happen if he goes back and he's like, yeah, I didn't do what I was sent there to do.
And you have no idea what that means.
Right.
But you will. And that's the fun of it. And that's the fun of this. The way they set up this season was it lays a lot of groundwork for a lot of things that are going to happen. And I don't know what the second season's going to be. I have a theory on what the second season will be, but I, of course, have a little bit of advantage because I know everything that happens already. But I have a theory as to what the arc of the second season will be. And I'm super curious as to what they're going to do. But to end our show, I think we've definitely hit an hour at this point, at least close to it.
Yeah. Before we end, I'm curious who your favorite side character is.
Well, okay, so out of the show, the way the show is portrayed, I would say it's Robot. It has to be Robot. He gets the most. His story is very well fleshed out, and they pay it off. And I know what's coming. I think Debbie is a close second.
Yeah.
I think because her comic story is nothing. She's a nothing character. Yeah. I don't want to say that. She's a very loving mom. She's very supportive in the comics, but she's more of a generic, like, person you care about character in the comics. But in the show, she gets a real 3-dimensional arc to herself from the beginning to the end. So I think she's a real close second. But no, the way the show is portrayed in this very first season, at least, I'm a big fan of what they're doing with Robot. And he's drawn really well. Everybody is animated perfectly in this show. That's another thing, is the animations are really good. A lot of the dialogue animation, a little stiff. But I think I read this somewhere where a lot of the budget, and you can tell a lot of the budget, rightfully so, went to the fights and the blood. So, and rightfully so. I'm okay with a little stiff dialogue for the sake of some really fucking epically animated fights.
Yeah, Delco is agreeing that the animation was so impressive, and animation is the same as the comics from what I've seen. The first few issues of the comic, the animations are kind of rough, and they're very gritty, which I thought was kind of fitting, as because I kind of saw where the story was going, so it kind of made sense. But after a few issues of the comic, they have a new illustrator take over, and it's just like so much better. But I still like the animation better than the comic art so far. I think that they're
still on.
Yeah, I think they did a better job with their animation.
You'll change your opinion soon. Trust me. The illustrations in the comics are fucking incredible. They get to be incredible. They don't start incredible. They become incredible. So you'll get there. Yep. But the animations in the show, again, are great. They adapt everyone perfectly. Everyone looks exactly like their comic counterparts, which is exactly how it should have been. And what was your favorite side character?
My favorite side character was probably Cecil.
Oh yeah, I mean, he had a lot of good moments. Walter Goggins, I know that. I know he was
Yes.
the voice actor for Cecil. I I liked his choices of the way he spoke. It was very Nick Fury. It was very government agent. Like I said in the
Yeah.
comics, he's a little bit kinder. He's a little bit to start. He's a little bit kinder and he's a little bit more soft spoken. But in the show, you could tell he's a hardened agent for the country, and he does everything he can for the country itself. So
Yep.
I
And
think
that's why I loved him, because they kind of changed him a little bit in the show, and they made him this almost heartless person that just does what the best thing he can do for the country, like no matter how much it sucks. And even Debbie's like, you're such a bastard, I hate you, and he's like, I hate me too. Like, I don't like doing this, but I have to.
yeah. That's a thing that I was okay with. Like I wasn't sure how I felt about that line at first, but then I realized, oh well, they can't really show the subtlety that the comics show because this is moving a lot fucking differently. This is in a different pace, so they kind of have to tell you like, obviously he's doing terrible things, but we're gonna make him very self-aware that he's doing terrible things. And it's
Right.
not a bad guy doing bad guys because he thinks the bad guy thing is the right thing to do. It's a good guy doing bad things who hates the fact that he has to be that guy. So and I that dichotomy too.
I think that arguably one of the worst things he does is he continues to bring the immortal back to life over and over and over again. Like, could you imagine if the public knew that he was constantly bringing the same person back to life after being murdered all the time?
He's a
like,
superhero.
That's sick. I mean, yeah, he's a superhero, but like, how many times does he have to die for your country? You know what I mean? Like, it's and using the dead soldiers to be these robotic.
Well, that's another
and Reanimen.
And that's the other thing, is another storyline that happens throughout the show is the D.A. Sinclair story. I'm very familiar with his name because he's a long running character because he's introduced in the exact same way in the comics. I don't think you've even gotten there yet. So
he was introduced, and you do see that he's making these Reanimen.
Okay, you haven't.
I just got up to the part where he captures Rick, and he's going to make him a Reanimen.
And the show just streamlines that. It's the literal same episode that he's introduced, and you find out the Reanimen, and then all of a sudden Rick is captured, and all of a sudden they find him. Like, this all happens in the same 45 minutes, but in the comics, it's stretched out like over 20 issues. But so in the show, D.A. Sinclair, who is this fellow student with Mark, who is this super genius, who is trying to make super soldiers, basically, out of homeless men. And which is disgusting and horrific, and the way he does it is horrific. And you see that with what happens to Rick, who is this love interest to William, which is again alluded in the comics, but in the show they just full on tell you, and I appreciated that. So in the comics you'll see what happens, and we won't spoil it, but in the show it gets to the end, and you see that Cecil brought on D.A. Sinclair to help with the quelling of Omni-Man, but even those Reanimen couldn't fucking stand a chance either.
But that's like sick and immoral to do that, and he does it for the betterment of his country. But I mean, that's still like a crazy guy thing to do, you know.
I don't want to dig too deep into it because like I said, the reveal that he's using these dead soldiers is the very last episode, so we don't really know the details yet, and I'm wondering if they might explore it in future seasons. So we'll see what happens. But so that was your favorite side character. What was your favorite fight?
My favorite fight, I mean, default, I want to say Omni-Man versus Invincible, but I don't think so. I really think my favorite fight was when they were fighting Machine Head and all his goons.
Really?
Because I didn't really view Omni-Man and Invincible's fight. I kind of viewed it as a beatdown. There wasn't really a fight. It wasn't a contest. It was just marking the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah.
But I was more excited watching the fight with Machine Head and his henchmen because like you didn't really know what was going to happen.
True. That's a good point. Yeah, because like I said, I actually brought that up earlier with Battle Beast. You don't know who Battle Beast is. Everyone who read the comics knows who Battle Beast is, but the people that are watching, you especially, who are watching it for the first time, going, "Oh, well, here's a bunch of villains for the good guys to beat," and they don't. They get absolutely dominated.
Yep.
And it starts as a regular fight, like you said, and it's good back and forth, and you're going, "Oh, this is exciting," but then it just fucking changes where they're just getting slaughtered, and and they do that a lot in the show, but in different contexts, which really help.
And it was very back and forth. You know, when they first got it, you're like, okay, they're going to fight. And then they start to lose. And then Mark has this, like, Super Saiyan Rage moment. And he starts beating. And then he just gets totally demolished again. You're like, fuck. Like, is he going to die right now? Exactly. And then the Guardians come in. And then they get fucked up. And then they get back up. And then they fuck. Like, it's like so. It was awesome. It was a great fight. But the thing that they added in that fight that they did, I don't think they did in the comics, was that Omni-Man was watching.
Yes, that's not in the comics. It's just it's only for the show that Omni-Man is basically watching his son get murdered.
And he did nothing because he was trying to see who the strongest people were. I think he was trying to evaluate who he was going to spare, honestly.
I think he was evaluating Mark's ability.
Because that too, yeah.
The whole thing for Nolan is he was waiting to take over Earth for Mark to get his superpowers. That's all he was waiting for. So as soon as he got it, as soon as Mark got his superpowers, then it was more of, okay, can you do this? Do you have the ability? So that fight was a big like teaching moment in Nolan's eyes, even though he was just watching his son
die. Pretty much, yeah.
I'd say, I didn't think you were going to say that. My favorite was the Guardians in the very first episode.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't get that in the comics. For the most part in the comics, the fights are very similar. They show the Battle Beast fight pretty much the same way it happens in the comics. The last fight with Mark and Omni-Man is pretty much the same as the comics, but you don't see a fight with the Guardians. You don't see Omni-Man fight the Guardians. They're just all dead. So I personally loved watching it happen. And one of my favorite notes was there was no music.
Yes.
It was just the sound of him ripping these people apart. But like I said, it wasn't instant. It was they were putting hits on him, strong hits. But then Nolan would get one good shot in, and it would instantly kill one of them. And then the rest of them would freak the fuck out. And then they'd start fighting again, and then he'd get another one. And it was just one by one by one. And then by the last three, it was just slaughter, slaughter, slaughter. So I thought that fight was so well done.
It was. And that was another perfect scene where, even though he's the strongest, it's still a struggle. Like, he doesn't just instantly vaporize and, like, demolish everybody. Like, he's got to work for it because they make it interesting, They don't make it like a cut and dry Superman where he's just, like, punching through everybody and, you just kind of assume that he's going to win because he almost died.
Are we getting any answers in the chat? Anybody have any of their favorite fights? Or
Delco said that D.A. Sinclair's a bum.
True.
I don't know. Does anybody else have any favorite characters, favorite fights? Before we rate this out of how many Viltrumites?
Out of 10 Viltrumites? Out of 10? Oh, well, here's the real question. Are we doing it 10 pre-Nolan murder Viltrumites or post-Nolan murder Viltrumites? Like the good Viltrumites or bad Viltrumites?
I guess bad, right? We can't really go back now that we know.
Powerful one, right? Yeah, you're right. We can't go back. It was never real. It was never real.
Speaking of that, I love that they explore that a lot in the comic, where they like struggle with the fact that their life is now totally changed. Like, everything they knew was a lie. Their whole family was a lie. It's crazy. Like, could you imagine?
No.
That's finding out that, like, one of your family members is a serial killer.
Yeah, it's the same concept, and they play it that way.
Yeah.
And I love that. I absolutely love that. I think the future is very bright for this show, and
Yes.
it already got as anyone would have expected, it got picked up for the next like 3 seasons. So we're definitely getting more. I can imagine they're going to go 8 episodes every season, and I think they should. I don't think they should drag this out too long. I think it should be 8 episodes again, 45 minutes each. And if they streamline this first season so well, I'm really excited to see how they do the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I think
Really,
the 8 episodes at 45 minutes are really easy to digest, and
yeah.
the way they do it, it's like you can't wait for the next week's episode.
And they
And you
built it
just
to that first big moment of the comics. They built to it perfectly. Quick anecdote of that though. It's I read this once where Robert Kirkman, when he was writing Invincible, the way he pitched it was exactly the way the show is progressing, with Omni Man being what he is. But when he was writing the comic, you saw how the first few issues were, generic superhero story, and the publishers or the studio that was help that was releasing the comics were like, "You got to hurry up, or we're going to cancel this. Like this isn't working." So then that next issue was Omni Man killing the Guardians. So even Robert Kirkman was trying to like stretch it and build up to it, but the studio dipped their hands into it, and he was like, "All right, well, fuck it, we're showing everyone this is what's gonna happen." And then it just kind of basically dominoes from there, where big shit happens after big shit happens after big shit happens.
yeah, and he streamlined his own story too. Like you see in the comics, there's like months and months where they just skip over. It's like, oh yeah,
Yes.
It's been 6 months since the
Like
last
in
time.
like 4 panels.
It's like
Yeah.
Jesus, okay, like we're we're moving right
Happens a
along
lot.
here.
That happens a lot in the comics. That happens a lot where he skips ahead in time just because there's nothing else to do except get to the next big moment.
They do in the
So
show too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for you to keep reading that. I'm really excited for the next season. Do you have any predictions? Because I know you know, because you don't know. So I want you to tell me, what is the Omni Man payoff? What happens next? Because Omni Man, I don't know if we fully said it, but Omni Man leaves. He doesn't die or anything. He doesn't get captured. He just straight up flies into space and he's gone, and nobody knows where he is. So
I don't think he's going to be coming back for a long time. That's my prediction. I think there's going to be a very big stretch of time where Mark kind of comes into his own and he becomes stronger. And maybe there's something that happens with Omni-Man and Viltrum and he's like forced to go back, or so they send somebody else. Oh, maybe that's what happens. Maybe they'll send somebody else because like or Nolan failed, That could be cool. They could do like a... Yeah, that'd be fun. I would like to see more Viltrumites, actually. I'd like to get more of their society played out in like, dialogue, and kind of like the Saiyans, how they kind of trickle into the show.
Yeah.
To go forward. I'd like to see more of that.
They never really dig too much into the Saiyans, but I think you'll be happy to see what happens with Viltrumites. But all right, yeah, I think that covers the first season of Invincible.
I think so.
Anybody in the chat have any last thoughts to add?
No.
All right, let's close this shit then. We are going to be back next week. I have no fucking idea what we're going to talk about yet, but we're going to figure something out. Hopefully something big happens news-wise, but if anything, we'll just come up with a topic, and we'll be back here probably around 11:30 again when we figure out technical difficulties.
Oh my god!
But thanks for everybody for sticking in. I wanted to say follow everybody else: Delco's Prodigal Son, Applejacks, Bonbon. I want everyone to have a great week, and praise be to Viltrum. What do you think?
Praise be to Viltrum. I mean, before we give the show our rating, just be sure to follow us on Facebook. Follow us on our Discord. You can stay up to date with all of our streamer schedules, any events we're having. We'll be having our weekly Monday night game night with Nerd Depot tonight. We're going to be playing Pummel Party at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And just be sure to stay up to date with all of our streams, all of our content, and let us know if you guys want us to talk about anything in particular. If you have any thoughts on Invincible, and just come join in the community. It's a good time.
All right, out of 10 Viltrumites, what are you giving it?
9.
Same.
9 evil Viltrumites.
9 evil, murderous Superman Viltrumites.
Yep. And the Discord link is in the chat. Thank you, Delco.
There we go. All right, friends. We'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.